Yes, there are still federal judges out there that are not afraid of the Trump administration, nor its Department of Justice, nor the Supreme Court, and just do the right thing for the American people because justice demands it. We have a new emergency order from Judge McConnell, the Chief Judge of Rhode Island, which will hopefully, finally, compel the Trump administration, on order of the court, to start making those $8 billion worth of SNAP food stamp payments to the most underprivileged, the most vulnerable in our society for the month of November. The judge has taken a different tact. There were two different judges who looked at this issue. One judge, Judge Talwani in Massachusetts, said, why don't you tell me today on Monday, if there's going to be agency action, and then I'll decide whether to enter a preliminary injunction or a temporary restraining order. No, Judge McConnell took what Donald Trump said on social media, trolled Donald Trump with it. In addition to it, took what the federal government Department of Justice wrote to him demanding a temporary restraining order be reduced to writing, and used the words against them, did like a judicial jujitsu and flipped it on Donald Trump. I cover it right here, the only way I know how, without blowing smoke or sunshine, on the MeidasTouch Network and for Legal AF. Let's talk about how we got here. Two different groups of plaintiffs ran into two different courts, 23 Democratic states. You notice no Republican states care about people dying from hunger and starvation in their below the poverty states, like the red states. Blue states ran to the rescue and filed a case that landed in Boston, Massachusetts, in front of Judge Talwani. Cities and public interest groups like Democracy Forward filed their own case on the same issue of whether Trump could terminate SNAP payments, food stamp payments, to this group because of the shutdown. They got Judge McConnell, Chief Judge. Now, you may remember that Chief Judge McConnell has tangled with the Trump administration before. He was one of the judges who early on issued a preliminary injunction against the Trump administration, stopping them from ripping the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship, out of the Constitution by executive order. He said, no, babies born on our soil are American citizens. That was Judge McConnell. Now, let's move to this case brought. The first party in the case is Rhode Island State Council of Churches versus Brooke Rollins at the Department of Agriculture, which is the regulator for the program. Here's how we got here. First, we had a filing by the Trump administration, an emergency motion to reduce the court's oral temporary restraining order to writing. By the way, there is, I'll tell you as a federal practitioner, there is no requirement that a federal judge issue it in writing. He can or she can, from the bench, give, and there's a transcript or oral recording, can give all of the factors, all of the analysis, all of the findings, and issue an injunction from the bench. Now, the Trump administration has tried to argue, no, judges can only do it in writing. Untrue. They got caught in that problem with Judge Boasberg about the 200 human beings without due process that were sent in the middle of the night to El Salvador's torture jail. They had a whole fight about on the record, off the record, temporary restraining order, writing, not writing. So now they've given to filing this, but they wrote something as grounds. They said, and the judge used it to toast their chestnuts, if you know what I mean. On page 2 of their motion, which they filed on Halloween, defendants, the Trump administration, are expeditiously attempting to comply with the court's order. No, in other words, recognizing that they had a temporary restraining order against them. They knew it, knowing they had to make the payments, like today, but are considering whether any emergency relief is required. Given the operational difficulties, we want it in writing, effectively. Judge said, I've done some reading myself. Here's how Judge McConnell started his order. This is at the very top, posted now on Legal AF Substack. Here we go. The defendants in their emergency motion have stated that defendants are expeditiously attempting to comply with the court's order. Okay. Also, he also knows what Trump truths out. I think, is that what they're calling? Instead of tweeted out, truths out. The president of the United States stated Friday evening, right? Which is also, this is all Halloween, back-to-back Halloween. I do not want Americans to go hungry. I ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. If we are given the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor, all in caps, to provide the funding. The judge wrote, the court greatly appreciates the president's quick and definitive response to this court's order and his desire to provide the necessary SNAP funding. I'm not quite sure that's what Trump was trying to do, but that's how the judge interpreted it, as almost a confession that he needed to comply with an existing temporary restraining order. Good job, Trump. Now, the holdup in both courts, Judge Talwani's court and Judge McConnell, was over full funding or partial funding. To pay out all of the 40 million Americans that wait for this. Think about that. 40 million Americans are waiting on SNAP payments. We're talking about the disabled, children, babies, the elderly. I mean, this is like the most vulnerable group in our population. And all they want to do is not die from malnutrition or starvation. And it's an $8 billion a month program. So what the judge said is, well, you have an emergency contingency fund set up by Congress of $6 billion. You can either do 3/4 payments. I mean, listen, I know basic fractions. You can either do 3/4 payments. That's not hard. Just go through whatever the payment was going to be and take a quarter off and then make it up later when the shutdown is over. Or go find additional funds like customs receipts there's just money that comes in regularly that you can go grab. Go grab that, make it a full $8 billion payment. And the judge said in his order, I'll read it to you in a moment, Judge McConnell said, and I want to know what you're doing. You're either going to make full payments on Monday, or by Wednesday, you're going to give me the plan you're going to use in order to make partial payments.
Hey everybody, Ben Meiselas here from the MeidasTouch Network. I wanted to let you know about my podcast partner, Michael Popok's new law firm. It's called the Popok Firm. Michael Popok's pursuing his dream of starting his own law firm, really based on the popular demand by all the Meidas Mighty and legal AFers who are approaching Michael Popok with their cases and saying, can you help us? And at that time, Popok was not able to. So he went out on his own. He started the Popok Firm, where he is now handling catastrophic injury cases like car accident cases, trucking cases, malpractice cases, big negligence cases, wrongful death cases. So if you or someone you know have a case like this, the consultation with Popok's firm is free. Give him a call, see if you have a case. It's thepopokfirm.com, thepopokfirm.com, or you can call 877-POPOK-AF, P-O-P-O-K-A-F. So 1-877-POPOK-AF. Give Michael Popok a call, and I'm really proud of you, Popok. Thanks for all the hard work you're putting in.
And then he ordered as follows. This is the judge. He goes through how SNAP got passed, the entitlement aspect of it, that people are entitled to it. He reminds Trump that in his first administration, when there was a shutdown, he made SNAP payments. So here's his order. If the government does not want to use, this is on page 5, if the government does not want to use its discretion to use funds available to make a full payment for November, then it must expeditiously resolve the administrative and clerical burdens it described in its papers, but under no circumstances shall the partial payments be made later than Wednesday. And by today, noon on Monday, the government must report to the court on what it will do to comply with the court's order. When that comes in, I will update my reporting here on MeidasTouch, on Legal AF Substack, on Alive, and on Legal AF Substack. So don't worry, I won't leave you in the lurch. I won't leave a cliffhanger when it comes to people suffering. I will give you the update on that. Here's how the judge summarizes it, so there's no dispute, no ambiguity. Paragraph 8. In summary, the government must make the full SNAP payment benefits by Monday. If they choose to use their discretion and not use other funds in addition to the contingency funds to make a full payment, then they must make a partial payment of the total amount of the contingency funds, and they must do this by Wednesday, November 5, 2027. The court grants the government's motion for a written order. There's a little troll. You wanted a written order? You like apples? How them apples? And then it's so ordered, John J. McConnell Jr., Chief Judge, United States District Court in Rhode Island. What's going to happen next? Well, they got Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, after the judge issued that order I just read to you. He went on with Jake Tapper on CNN. And either he's lying to the American people, which is certainly possible and likely, or he wasn't briefed properly to go on with Jake Tapper because he acts like he's still waiting on a written order, and the written order came out a day before he went on this show. Let me show you the clip.
Two federal judges ruled Friday night the White House must tap into the contingency funds to partially cover SNAP benefits that expired this weekend due to the shutdown. Yesterday, the court clarified that at least a partial payment needs to be made by Wednesday. When can we expect the Trump administration to make these payments?
Well, President Trump just truthed out that he needs to hear from the courts how this is going to be done. And Jake, as you know, the best way for SNAP benefits to get paid is for five Democrats to cross the aisle and reopen the government.
Right, but there is this contingency fund, and as recently as September 30th, the Agricultural Department had a memo saying that these funds, the contingency funds, I think it's about $5 or $6 billion, could be used to pay these benefits. You know, it'd only be 2 or 3 weeks, but that's a lot for people who need the food.
Well, President Trump President Trump just truthed out that he's very anxious to get this done, and it's got to go through the courts. The courts keep jamming up things. Democrats are in the middle of a civil war, and they should just open the government. That is the easiest way to do this.
Is the administration going to appeal the ruling by the judge? Is that what you mean by the courts need to weigh in? Because the courts have weighed in.
No, but there's a process that has to be followed. So we got to figure out what the process is. President Trump wants to make sure that people get their food benefits.
So it could be done by Wednesday.
Could be.
Okay.
Could be. And 5 Democratic senators could cross the aisle and open the government by Wednesday.
Now, you see what he did there? We're just waiting on a judge to give us a written order so we can follow it. Okay, there's the written order. It came out the day before. It's only 5 pages, 6 pages. You couldn't read it before you got on Jake Tapper? No, you don't want to prepare. They purposely don't prepare senior government officials and Department of Justice lawyers to answer questions because they can go, I don't know. Well, I know. And our audience now knows. And then I think what I heard in there is that they're not going to appeal. The government is not going to appeal this order. They're going to make the effing payments. We'll continue to follow it. Fast-moving story. So many Americans are at risk right now. And that's why, whether it's the states and the states' attorneys general, or it's the public interest groups like Democracy Forward, they are saving our democracy, our constitutional public, and Americans. Simply put, the Trump administration is killing Americans. There's no other way about it. I'm going to have the pleasure and the honor to interview about 11 Democratic attorneys general later in the month during a conference in Phoenix. We're going to be bringing all those interviews to you here on Meidas and on Legal AF. We're going to host it, have that national conversation that we need, and talk about the 50 or more lawsuits and the hundreds of billions of dollars of funding that they have saved by filing these lawsuits. Until my next report, take a moment, come over to Legal AF YouTube, hit the subscribe button, Legal AF Substack, where you can read all these filings for yourself. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.